Good morning, and let me share with you something interesting. Luke 9:61 to 62. And another said, Lord, I will follow you, but first let me go and bid them farewell who are at my house. But Jesus said to them, No one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. This person is willing to follow Jesus. All he wants to do is just go home and say farewell to his family, give a goodbye. And Jesus, nope, not even that. You can't look back. You got to go forward. That's pretty harsh, isn't it? Now, the first person, if you read this chapter, first person that came to Jesus and said he wanted to follow him, Jesus says, hey, birds of the air have a nest and foxes have a den, but son of man, there's no place to rest my head. You're going to have to pay a price if you want to follow me. And apparently, it doesn't say, but apparently this particular applicant he failed his interview, and he was declined discipleship. The second time, though, Jesus offered a discipleship, said, come on, follow me. Now, you got to remember, it was quite an honor for a master teacher to invite someone to be his student, to be his disciple, particularly, the reputation that Jesus was building this time, and Jesus was a master teacher. That's like getting into Harvard or Yale, and everyone would aspire to wanting to be mentored by a master teacher. So it was usually the teacher that chose the students rather than the students choosing the teacher. And in this case, Jesus chose this man and said, follow me. You'll make a good disciple. And the man said, okay, but first let me go bury my father. Well, that sounds a little harsh, too. I mean, why couldn't you let the poor guy bury his dad? Why make him, follow immediately and not fulfill his obligations? Well, I tend to agree with a lot of the preachers, which you probably heard, is that the father wasn't dead yet, but he wanted to stay around until the father died. And that's probably really what it was, is that in Judaism you had certain protocols, certain laws to follow when a family member died. You had certain obligations. But the community would step in if there was no family member available to follow these protocols. It was the duty of the community. I remember not too long ago, I have him right in my bus in another hour here. He's Jewish, and his mother died. He was a volunteer police officer on 9/11, and spent a number of months working through the rubble there on 9/11, and apparently that caused a lot of physical problems. He's on dialysis and everything now, and now he's on disability. The point is that he doesn't have any money. All he's got is what he makes on disability. And, Jews don't believe in cremation, and they believe in there's certain things you do. And so the whole funeral cost around $13,000. And as the son, that was his obligation to make sure his mother was buried properly. But the community, the Jewish community, stepped in, and they paid for everything. Everything except those particulars that was his mother's personal wish to her son to do. And that, rightfully, the Jewish community did not pay for, because that was the obligation of the son, to fulfill the mother's wishes. The community took care of all the religious protocol, followed all the religious things to do. But when it came to personal things, personal desires between the son and the mother, the synagogue did not contribute in payment to that. That was left as something for the son rightfully to handle. And of course, he has no money, and we recognized it, many of us bus drivers, and we took a collection for him to help pay for this, because we knew how important it was for him to fulfill his mother's wishes. And we didn't think anything less of him for it. But you see, Jesus said, in Luke 14:26. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brother and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Now that's kind of a harsh word, hate, and it seems like all modern translations walk in lockstep. They try to say love less, but that's not what the word in Greek means. It just means hate in Greek. But the language that Jesus spoke, Aramaic, the word that's used is sona. And sona is the word that's used for a briar. You know those briars, those prickly things that you get on your leg when you're walking through a field? And it just irritates. It's an irritant. And that's basically what the word sona means. And that's what Jesus meant. If you're not willing to be an irritant to your family for my sake, you can't be my disciple. And that's what this man who said, let me go bury my father. The community would have buried the father, but there were certain personal desires the father had, and it was up to the son to fulfill that obligation. But Jesus was saying, hey, as long as, you follow the laws of Judaism, we're okay. The personal things, well, what are you putting first? Are you putting me first, or are you putting your father first? In other words, are you willing to be an irritant to your father? Because it would be irritating to the father. The son wouldn't be around in case the father did pass away. It was like a 3-year venture in discipleship, and he might not be there if the father passed away. And the father would be very irritated. Why are you following this teacher who's probably a heretic to begin with? And he's going to create some irritation there in the family. But if you're not willing to be an irritant to your family for the sake of Jesus, you can't be his disciple. And then finally, the third person simply says, let me go bid farewell to my family. Well, this is another level of serving God that you have to overcome, because the word farewell in Aramaic is shalom, which equivalent to the Hebrew is shalom, peace. Let me first go, and it does mean farewell and goodbye, even today in Israel, shalom aleichem, aleichem shalom. It's the greeting, hello and goodbye. And you could translate it as farewell. But it seems to be more than that. It also means peace. And what he was saying is, well, let me first go make peace with some, I got some problems at home. Let me make peace with them, and then I'll follow you. I can't follow you if I got these problems at home. But Jesus is saying, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. Now, in ancient times, as even today, when you plow a field, it's got to be a straight line. And it takes a lot of concentration. In those days, when you just got that wooden hand plow, it takes a lot of concentration to plow a field. And they usually use, landowners use day laborers to do the plowing. And they would stand afar, they'd observe their workers as they were plowing the field. And if they saw a worker looking back, what the worker's doing is looking to see how much he's accomplished. See, how close am I getting to finishing this job so I can go home and be with the boys, and have a beer or two. His mind is not on his job. His mind is getting this job done with so he can get his wages and go and have some fun. And he could care less whether he has a straight line or not, whether he's dug deep enough or, he just get it plowed, and no matter, how the work is done. If an overseer saw a plower, look back, he would fire him immediately. Because you have to keep your mind on your job. Keep your mind on what you're doing to make sure you do that plowing right. And the ones who never look back, the ones who just didn't care what they accomplished, didn't care what was going on behind them, just kept pushing forward, making sure they dug deep enough and straight enough, wide enough, they did it right. And whether they had to work overtime to do it right, it didn't matter. They were concerned about doing the right job. Those were the ones who had the job. And that's what Jesus was saying. If you've got problems at home, why didn't you resolve those problems before you came to me? The only reason you're going to resolve those problems at home is because you want to serve me. You want the honor of being a disciple. It isn't going to work that way, buddy. Your mind is not on this. Your mind is more on, the honor of being a disciple, so you can brag to everybody back home that you were trained by a master teacher, mentored by a master teacher. If you've got problems at home, you should have resolved those before you came to me wanting to resolve. It's too late now, because now you're just going to do it to be a disciple, and you got the wrong motives. And so what Jesus was teaching is that if you want to be his disciple, first you need to put him before everything, even your own family. If your own family's going to object and they're going to be irritated by it, Jesus said, but I come first. That's pretty harsh, but he wants that total dedication. The first person that came to Jesus, you got to be willing to pay a price. And I just saw the proof to my new book coming out, which is going to talk about this coming year, where Christians are going to have to pay a price. And if you're not willing to pay that price, you can't be his disciple. And then thirdly, if you want to be a disciple of God, you got to make sure that you're okay with all your brothers and sisters, that there is no hassles or problems that's going to interfere, that's going to take your mind off your service to God, that's going to be a hindrance to your service to God, that somebody's going to point to and say, who are you to talk about serving God, giving my life to God, and when you can't even keep your own family right? Forget it, buddy. You need to make things right among your friends and families, among your fellow believers. And if you have a problem with each other, fellow believers, the world's going to look at that and say, hey, that's not the type of Christianity I want, where you're in some church where everybody's fighting each other and backbiting and gossiping. I don't want to be a part of that. We're going to be called to task this coming year. We're going to be called to be true disciples of God. And if we're going to be true disciples of God, we need to be sure that he has preeminence over all things. In other words, he's with you every moment of the day, and everything you do is unto him. That's what a true disciple is.